Most people imagine intimidation as something obvious. They picture a loud voice, a commanding personality, or someone who deliberately seeks control over others. But psychological intimidation often operates in a far subtler way. In many cases, the people who intimidate others the most are completely unaware they are doing so. This is because intimidation is not always created by behavior. Sometimes it is created by presence. Have you ever entered a room and noticed a sudden shift in the atmosphere? Conversations become slightly more careful. People seem more self-conscious. Some become unusually polite, while others withdraw altogether. At first glance, this appears irrational. After all, nothing threatening has occurred. Yet beneath the surface, something psychological is taking place. Human beings are constantly reading one another on an unconscious level. Long before words are exchanged, the mind is evaluating confidence, authenticity, emotional stability, and self-awareness. These signals are often detected instinctively rather than consciously. As a result, people frequently react to qualities they cannot fully explain. One of the most intimidating qualities a person can possess is genuine presence. Presence means being fully grounded in yourself rather than constantly seeking approval from others. It means being comfortable with silence, comfortable with uncertainty, comfortable with who you are. This creates an unusual effect. Many people spend their lives adjusting themselves to fit expectations. They monitor how they appear, what others think, and whether they are being accepted. Beneath these behaviors often lies a quiet fear of judgment or rejection. When they encounter someone who seems less controlled by those fears, an uncomfortable comparison begins. The reaction is rarely conscious. Instead, they may feel nervous without understanding why. They may become overly talkative, defensive, or eager to impress. They may assume you are judging them even when you are simply listening. In reality, what they are experiencing is not your judgment. They are experiencing their own self-awareness reflected back at them. The psyche often reacts strongly when confronted with qualities it has not fully developed within itself. Confidence exposes insecurity. Calmness exposes inattention. Authenticity exposes performance. This is why intimidation is frequently misunderstood. It is not necessarily about making others feel small. More often it is about unintentionally revealing something they would rather not see the most. Intimidating people are often those who have stopped hiding from themselves, and that presence speaks louder than words. Once we understand that intimidation often begins as a psychological reaction rather than a conscious act, the first visible sign starts to make sense. People become defensive around you, even when you have given them no reason to be. At first, this behavior can be confusing. You ask a simple question, and the other person immediately begins explaining themselves in excessive detail. You make a casual observation, and they respond as though they have been criticized. Sometimes people justify their choices, defend their opinions, or become strangely tense before any disagreement has even occurred. On the surface, it appears irrational, yet beneath the surface, the unconscious mind is responding to something deeper. Human beings naturally develop psychological defenses to protect their self-image. Everyone carries insecurities, doubts, contradictions, and unresolved conflicts. Most of the time, these hidden vulnerabilities remain buried beneath everyday interactions. But certain people have a way of bringing them closer to the surface without saying a single word. When someone possesses strong self-awareness, emotional stability, or a clear sense of identity, others often become more conscious of their own uncertainty. The comparison happens automatically. They may not even realize it is occurring. All they know is that your presence makes them feel exposed. Imagine a person who secretly doubts their abilities. Around most people, they can ignore this insecurity. But when they encounter someone who appears confident and comfortable with themselves, that hidden doubt suddenly becomes harder to avoid. As a result, they begin defending themselves before they have actually been challenged. The same dynamic appears in many areas of life. A person insecure about their success may constantly explain their achievements. Someone uncertain about a relationship may repeatedly justify it. An individual struggling with self-worth may become overly sensitive to harmless comments. The defense is not directed at you, it is directed at the discomfort your presence unintentionally awakens. This is one of the strange realities of human psychology. People often react not to what is happening externally, but to what is being activated internally. A simple conversation becomes emotionally charged because it touches an insecurity that already existed beneath. Awareness. What makes this sign particularly revealing is that the defensiveness often appears before any conflict arises. You may be calm, respectful, and genuinely curious, yet the other person behaves as though they are standing trial. In truth, the battle is not taking place between you and them. It is taking place between them and the parts of themselves they are trying to protect, and sometimes your presence simply makes those defenses impossible to ignore. As we move deeper into the psychology of intimidation, another sign begins to appear, one that is often misunderstood. People assume you are judging them, even when you have said very little. This can be a strange experience. You remain quiet during a conversation, listening more than speaking, and yet others become visibly uncomfortable. They begin explaining themselves without being asked. They rush to fill moments of silence. Some even react as though you have criticized them, despite the fact that no criticism was ever spoken. Why does this happen? Because silence has a unique psychological power. Most people are accustomed to constant reassurance. Through words, facial expressions, and social rituals, individuals continuously communicate approval, agreement, and emotional safety. Silence interrupts this process. It creates a space where assumptions begin to grow. The human mind dislikes uncertainty. When information is missing, it instinctively fills the gaps. If someone feels secure within themselves, silence may feel calm and natural. But if a person carries hidden insecurities, silence often becomes a screen onto which they project their fears. Suddenly, they begin imagining what you might be thinking. Perhaps they believe you are evaluating them. Perhaps they fear they have said something foolish. Perhaps they worry they are being exposed. None of these reactions necessarily originate from reality. They originate from the unconscious. A person who is comfortable with themselves rarely fears being observed. But a person struggling with self-doubt often experiences observation as a threat. The mere presence of a thoughtful, attentive listener can feel unsettling because it removes the distractions that normally keep those insecurities hidden. This effect becomes even stronger when someone possesses genuine self-awareness. Individuals who spend time examining their own emotions, motives, and contradictions often develop a certain depth in their presence. They listen differently. They notice things others overlook. They are less dependent on constant conversation to feel comfortable. Ironically, this quality is often mistaken for judgment. People assume that because you are quiet, you must be evaluating them. In reality, you may simply be observing, reflecting, or allowing the conversation to unfold naturally. Yet the less you reveal about your thoughts, the more others are forced to confront their own. What they perceive as your judgment is frequently their own self-judgment, echoing back at them. This is why some of the most intimidating people are not the loudest or most dominant. They are the ones who are comfortable enough with themselves to remain silent. And in that silence, others begin hearing the voices they have been trying to avoid. Another sign that you may intimidate people without realizing it is that they constantly compare themselves to you. This comparison is not always obvious. Sometimes it appears as admiration. Sometimes it appears as competition. Sometimes it even appears as criticism. But beneath these different reactions lies the same psychological process. Human beings naturally evaluate themselves in relation to others. We look around to determine where we stand, whether we are succeeding, whether we are valued, whether we are enough. Most of this happens unconsciously. People rarely admit how often they compare themselves to those around them. Yet these comparisons quietly shape emotions, relationships, and self-worth. When someone possesses qualities that others desire but have not yet developed within themselves, comparison intensifies. Perhaps you are comfortable being alone. Perhaps you speak with confidence. Perhaps you maintain strong boundaries. Perhaps you remain calm under pressure. Perhaps you pursue your goals without constantly seeking validation. To you, these qualities may feel normal. They are simply part of who you are. But to someone struggling with insecurity, they can become powerful reminders of what they believe is missing within themselves. This is where intimidation begins. The discomfort is not necessarily caused by your actions. It is caused by the internal comparison your presence unconsciously triggers. A person may leave a conversation with you feeling inadequate without understanding why. They may admire you and resent you at the same time. They may praise your qualities while secretly feeling threatened by them. The unconscious mind often reacts this way when confronted with an undeveloped aspect of itself. For example, someone who longs for independence may feel unsettled around a person who lives freely according to their own values. Someone who struggles with self-confidence may feel uncomfortable around an individual who does not constantly seek approval. What appears to be intimidation is often the pain of comparison. This is why some people become unusually competitive around you. They feel compelled to prove themselves. Others may downplay your accomplishments or search for flaws in your character. These reactions are rarely about you personally. They are attempts to restore balance within their own self-image. The deeper truth is that people are often disturbed by qualities they secretly wish they possessed. Your confidence reminds them of their doubts. Your authenticity reminds them of their masks. Your discipline reminds them of their excuses. And without realizing it, you become a mirror reflecting possibilities they have not yet embraced within themselves. Sometimes, the most intimidating thing about a person is not what they achieve, it is what they reveal in others. As we continue exploring the hidden ways people become intimidated, we arrive at a sign that often creates more discomfort than confidence, intelligence, or success. It is the ability to think for yourself. Most people like to believe they are independent thinkers. Yet much of human behavior is shaped by invisible social pressures. From childhood, we learn which opinions are acceptable, which beliefs earn approval, and which behaviors help us belong. Over time, many individuals unconsciously adapt themselves to the expectations of their environment. There is a powerful psychological reason for this. Human beings fear exclusion. Deep within the psyche exists a desire to remain connected to the group. Throughout history, belonging meant safety and survival. As a result, many people learn to sacrifice parts of their authentic selves in exchange for acceptance. But some individuals follow a different path. They do not automatically agree simply to avoid conflict. They do not change their values to gain approval. They are willing to stand alone when necessary. Not because they seek attention or rebellion, but because they place truth above comfort. This quality can be deeply intimidating. When a person encounters someone who refuses to blindly follow social expectations, an unconscious question begins to emerge. Why am I unable to do the same? The comparison is rarely spoken aloud. Instead, it appears as discomfort, criticism, or resistance. People may describe independent individuals as stubborn, difficult, arrogant, or detached. Yet these labels often conceal something deeper. The presence of a truly independent person exposes how much of our own behavior may be driven by fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of standing apart from the crowd. Most people spend years constructing identities that fit comfortably within social expectations. When someone refuses to participate in this performance, it challenges the psychological foundation upon which those identities are built. This challenge is unsettling because it forces others to confront an uncomfortable possibility. Perhaps they are living according to rules they never consciously chose. The independent Thinker becomes a living reminder that another way of being is possible. Not everyone welcomes that reminder. Some will admire it, some will resent it, some will feel threatened by it, but almost no one remains completely unaffected by it. The deeper truth is that people are often intimidated by freedom, not because they dislike it, but because it reveals the invisible chains they have accepted for themselves, and nothing unsettles the unconscious more than a person who refuses to live by fear. Another sign that you may intimidate others without realizing it is your ability to remain emotionally stable when situations become chaotic. This quality is often misunderstood because emotional stability rarely attracts attention to itself. It is quiet, controlled, and grounded. Yet psychologically, it can have a powerful effect on the people around you. Most individuals are accustomed to reacting emotionally to life's pressures. Stress creates panic, conflict creates anger, uncertainty creates anxiety. These reactions are natural. However, when someone remains calm in situations that would normally provoke strong emotional responses, it creates a subtle psychological contrast, and contrast reveals what is hidden. Imagine a room filled with tension. People are arguing, emotions are escalating, and everyone is trying to defend their position. Then there is one person who remains composed. They listen carefully. They speak deliberately. They do not become consumed by the emotional atmosphere around them. To some, this presence feels reassuring. To others, it feels intimidating. Why? Because emotional stability often exposes emotional instability. The unconscious mind constantly compares itself to its surroundings. When someone encounters a person who possesses a level of inner control they have not yet developed, an uncomfortable awareness can emerge. Their own impulsiveness becomes more visible. Their own anxiety becomes harder to ignore. Their own emotional dependence on external circumstances becomes impossible to hide. This is not because the stable person is superior. It is because calmness functions like a mirror. Many people spend years allowing their emotions to dictate their actions. They seek reassurance whenever uncertainty appears. They depend on validation whenever self-doubt arises. They become overwhelmed whenever life refuses to follow their expectations. When they encounter someone who remains grounded despite these same challenges, it quietly challenges their understanding of themselves. The reaction can take many forms. Some people admire emotional stability and seek to learn from it. Others become defensive because it highlights their own inner turmoil. Some may even interpret calmness as coldness or detachment because they cannot imagine responding differently to pressure. But beneath all these reactions lies the same psychological reality. People are often disturbed by qualities they have not yet integrated into their own lives. The ability to remain calm does not mean the absence of emotion. It means developing a relationship with emotion rather than being controlled by it. And in a world where many people are ruled by their reactions, a person who possesses inner balance can seem unexpectedly powerful. Sometimes the quietest person in the room creates the deepest psychological impact. As we move deeper into the psychology of intimidation, we arrive at one of the most unsettling qualities a person can possess: the ability to see through masks. Most human interactions take place on the surface. People present carefully constructed versions of themselves to the world. They highlight certain qualities, conceal others, and adapt their behavior depending on the situation. This is not necessarily deception. It is simply part of social life. Everyone develops a public identity that helps them navigate relationships and gain acceptance. But beneath that public identity lies a deeper reality. There are fears that remain unspoken, motives that remain hidden, emotions that are carefully controlled, conflicts that never reach the surface. Most of the time, these aspects remain invisible because few people look deeply enough to notice them. Yet some individuals possess an unusual sensitivity to human behavior. They pay attention to subtle inconsistencies, They notice shifts in tone, body language, emotional energy, and unspoken tension. They sense when someone's words and emotions are moving in different directions, and people often know when this is happening. Even if nothing is said aloud, many individuals can feel when they are being truly seen. This creates a strange psychological reaction. On one hand, there is a desire to be understood. On the other hand, there is a fear of being exposed. This fear runs deeper than most realize. Human beings spend enormous amounts of energy protecting their self-image. They want others to see them in a certain way. They want their weaknesses hidden and their strengths visible. When they encounter someone who seems capable of looking beyond the performance, a quiet discomfort emerges. The person may become guarded. They may avoid eye contact. They may change the subject. They may feel nervous without understanding why what they are experiencing is not necessarily fear of you. It is fear of what you might notice. This is why highly perceptive individuals often intimidate others without intending to. Their presence reduces the effectiveness of social masks. They create an environment where pretense feels difficult to maintain. The irony is that such people are often not trying to expose anyone at all. They are simply observant. They have spent enough time examining their own inner world that they naturally recognize similar patterns in others. When you become familiar with your own fears, you begin noticing fear in others. When you understand your own contradictions, you begin recognizing contradictions around you. And when people sense that you can see beyond appearances, they often feel vulnerable in a way they cannot easily explain, because nothing challenges a false image more than a person who quietly sees the truth behind it, and few things are more intimidating than being understood without speaking a word. As we arrive at the final sign, we encounter perhaps the most powerful and least understood source of intimidation: authenticity. Most people spend a significant portion of their lives trying to become acceptable. They learn how to behave, what to say, what to hide, and which parts of themselves should remain unseen. Over time, many become so identified with these social adaptations that they lose contact with their genuine nature. They begin living according to expectations they never consciously chose. This is why authentic people can have such a profound psychological impact. Authenticity is not perfection. It is not confidence without fear. It is not the absence of flaws. Authenticity is the willingness to be honest about who you are, even when that honesty does not guarantee approval. Such individuals no longer depend entirely on external validation to define their worth. They may appreciate acceptance, but they are not controlled by it. They are capable of standing by their values, expressing their true opinions, and living according to their inner convictions rather than constantly adjusting themselves to satisfy others. To the unconscious mind, this can be deeply unsettling. Why? Because authenticity exposes performance. Many people secretly suspect that parts of their identity have been built around pleasing others, avoiding rejection, or maintaining a certain image. They sense the gap between who they truly are and who they present to the world. Yet confronting that gap requires courage, and courage is often uncomfortable. When an authentic person enters the room, that hidden conflict becomes harder to ignore. Without saying a word, they raise a silent question: what would my life look like if I stopped pretending? For some, this question feels inspiring. For others, it feels threatening. The reaction often depends on how much of themselves they have already accepted. People who are disconnected from their own authenticity may interpret genuine self-expression as arrogance. They may criticize independence as selfishness. They may feel irritated by confidence that does not seek permission. But beneath these reactions often lies something deeper, a confrontation with aspects of themselves they have not yet embraced. Authentic people do not intimidate others because they are trying to dominate them. They intimidate others because they demonstrate a level of psychological freedom that many secretly desire but have not yet achieved. The greatest form of power is not controlling others. It is no longer needing to hide from yourself. And when someone reaches that point, their very existence becomes a challenge to every mask in the room. Now that we have explored the 8 signs, a deeper question remains. Why do these qualities create such strong reactions in other people? Most individuals assume intimidation is caused by status, power, attractiveness, intelligence, or success. While these factors can play a role, they rarely explain the full psychological picture. The truth is far more subtle. People are not intimidated solely by what they see. They are intimidated by what they feel in themselves when they see it. The human mind constantly seeks balance. It works hard to maintain a stable image of who we believe we are. We construct identities, develop habits, adopt beliefs, and create explanations that help us navigate life with a sense of certainty. Yet beneath this carefully organized surface exists another reality, one filled with doubts, fears, unrealized potential, hidden desires, and unresolved conflicts. Most of the time, these deeper forces remain unconscious, but certain. People have a way of bringing them closer to awareness. A confident person reminds others of their insecurity. An authentic person reminds others of their masks. An independent thinker reminds others of their conformity. An emotionally stable person reminds others of their inner chaos. A perceptive observer reminds others of what they are trying to conceal. The discomfort does not originate from the quality itself. It originates from the comparison that quality unconsciously creates. This is why intimidation often says more about the observer than the observed. When someone reacts strongly to your presence, they are rarely responding to your entire personality. They are responding to the part of you that touches something unresolved within themselves. In psychological terms, people frequently project their hidden struggles onto others. Instead of confronting their own fears directly, they experience those fears through the people around them. The irony is that many individuals who intimidate others have no desire to do so. They are often quiet, reflective, and focused on their own path. Yet because they have confronted parts of themselves that others continue avoiding, they naturally become symbols of something deeper. They represent possibilities of greater self-awareness, greater authenticity, greater freedom from fear, and possibilities can be frightening, not because they are dangerous, but because they reveal how much more is available beyond the limits we have accepted. In the end, intimidation is rarely about making others feel small. It is about awakening something they can no longer ignore, and sometimes the people who unsettle us most are the ones showing us the parts of ourselves still waiting to be discovered.